house built on this site. The first house we know was here by 1731. It was a little wooden single house owned by a gunsmith named John Milner. And we know that he had his forge in what is now our back garden. In 1740, Charleston had a very severe fire. Over 300 houses burned. The little wooden one that was here was one of the ones that burned. Within a couple of years, the Milners had rebuilt. This time they built a brick single house, and they also built all of the outbuildings or dependencies that you will see at the end of your tour in the garden. So those buildings actually predate this one. In 1770, Daniel Heyward bought the lot with all the buildings on it, kept everything except the little single house, had it torn down, and had this much larger Georgian double house built as a wedding present for his son Thomas. Thomas and Daniel were from one of the wealthier of the rice planting families here in colonial South Carolina. Their plantations were to the south of us in what was then known as St. Luke's Parish, now parts of Beaufort and Jasper counties. Excuse me. Thomas Heyward was best known as one of the four signers of the Declaration of Independence from South Carolina. He was an attorney, and after the Revolution, he built another townhouse, this one over on Meeting Street, and so wasn't using this one much. Turned its use over to a relative who ran a boarding school for young ladies here. In 1791, President Washington was making his southern tour. He had toured the northern states a couple of years earlier. It was time to come south for a couple of reasons. You can't forget that Washington was a farmer, and he had a professed interest in the rice culture of this part of the country. But more importantly, he saw it as the opportunity to bring together all those newly created states into that United States of America. He knew that he would be here in Charleston longer than anywhere else. His itinerary called for him to be here for 8 days, and he did not want to show any favoritism or partiality to friends or family. He had a cousin, William Washington, who lived here. So he asked the city of Charleston to find a place for him to stay. He did not want to be obliged to anybody. The city eventually rented this house from the Heyward family for Washington's use during his entire time here. After he left Charleston, he then went on down to Savannah for a couple of days before heading back to Philadelphia. In 1794, the Heyward family sold the house to Judge John Grimke. Judge Grimke was a Revolutionary War hero, but he was probably best known for his two daughters, Angelina and Sarah, who were noted suffragists and abolitionists. After the Grimkes sold the house, it remained a single-family home until the 1850s when it became a boarding house. And then in 1880, a German baker bought the house, and he did all sorts of things. Took out this window and put in a door for his family's use. He took out the front door and the two front windows in the room across from us, put in a shop window, lowered the floor over there, turned that into his bake shop. He may have used part of the old outside kitchen as part of his bakery, we're not certain about that. His family kept the house until 1929 when the Charleston Museum had the opportunity to purchase it, restore the facade, furnish it, and open it as Charleston's first historic house museum. All of the furnishings and decorative arts pieces that you see throughout this house are from the collection of the Charleston Museum, and 70% of the furniture in this house is Charleston made. The newest piece in the house is this bookcase that was made by the cabinet maker Robert Walker. Walker was particularly well known for his beautifully turned finials and for his use of satinwood inlay on his pieces. He also is a little bit different as a Charleston cabinet maker in that he actually put a paper label on a lot of his furniture. Most Charleston cabinet makers might have a particular motif or a way of marking it, but they didn't necessarily put a paper label on their furniture. Now, a much more typical Charleston piece is this wonderful chest on chest here. This was made by the cabinet maker William Axon. An axum would mark his furniture by carving his name into the underside of a piece of furniture. Typical Charleston traits on this piece include the use of full fluting and half fluting here on the corners. Other cabinet making centers at this time were using full fluting or half fluting, but they weren't combining it the way Charleston cabinet makers were. Of course, like most 18th and early 19th century Charleston made furniture, the primary wood is mahogany. Generally, the mahogany at this time was coming from the Dominican Republic. And the secondary or interior woods on this piece of furniture are cypress and yellow pine. Cypress, yellow pine, white pine, occasionally cedar were the typical secondary or interior woods for Charleston-made furniture. The Heywards, like most of the planter families, only used the townhouse for part of the year. They were here from early May until late October to avoid the malaria mosquitoes on the plantations. And then they were here for 6 to 8 weeks in January and February for the social season. With all that moving back and forth is where we get the Charleston triple chest. You'll notice it has handles on the sides as well as the front. You can take 1, 2, or all 3 sections with you when moving between houses. It's a wonderful concept. It has only one problem. It's also easy to lose 1 or 2 sections over time. It gets lost, left at one house or another, in an attic, a barn, whatever. The result is this is one of 3 known Charleston triple chests that has all of its original parts. Mentioned that cypress was a typical secondary wood for our furniture, but it was primary wood for paneling and woodworking to early Charleston houses. It, besides being an easily obtained native wood, it has some other great properties. It's easy to carve, it's impervious to rot, and the big thing around here is termites don't like it. So it was used a great deal in early Charleston houses. It generally was painted, however, because it was considered such a common building material that you wanted to make it just a little bit more special than it really was. As we go throughout the house, you'll notice that there are in several rooms is a door on either side of the fireplace. If it is on the side toward an external wall, it opens to a passageway to the room behind it, referred to around here as a closet thoroughfare. If it opens toward an interior wall, it opens to a shallow closet, which would originally have had shelves. Do recommend taking a few minutes to look at some of the photos in the cabinet. The leftmost photo is what the house looked like when the baker had done his thing. The center photo is of the drawing room, late 19th, early 20th century, and then the photos to the right are of the room piece vistas. This room and the room across the hall were considered the public rooms of the house. These were the rooms we know when the Heywards were here that Thomas Heyward used as his office. One may have been an office, one may have been a reception room. As I mentioned, he was an attorney as well as a rights planner. This is where he would have conducted both his personal and his professional business. If y'all have any questions whatsoever, I'll be glad to answer them for you. If not, we'll step out here into the hallway. As I mentioned, these were the public rooms of the house. This archway was kind of an invisible door between the public part of the house and the private or family part of the house. The social mores of the time were such that Heyward's associates would have known they did not come through into the private part of the house unless invited. We, however, are going back to the family dining room.
Judy, here are the Hogarths that we saw at.
Oh, yes, those are the 6 Hogarths
Yeah.
from Marriage a la Mode.
Yeah. Can't remember which gallery we saw them in.
I call match. This was the family dining room. It was not an entertaining room. We know when the Heywards were here, it was also used as a family day room or sitting room. Of course, entertaining in Charleston houses was done on the second floor. This room did not have to be large since the children would not be dining with their parents until they were about 12 or 13, but rather taking their meals, excuse me, on the third floor where their rooms were. Room has its advantages and its disadvantages as a dining room. A disadvantage being that the stable and the stable yard were right out there. It was not bricked over at that time. You have the dust and the smells coming in all the time. The windows are open most of the year. The advantage being the kitchen building is right out there, making it easy enough to bring the meals in. Over the mantel we have a portrait of Daniel Heyward, Thomas's father, the man we consider the builder or designer of the house. And then to the between the windows here, a portrait of Daniel's second wife, Jane Elizabeth, who was Thomas's stepmother. One piece that we have in this room, which you would not normally find in a fairly formal room like this, is wonderful South Carolina-made sugar chest of walnut and yellow pine. Sugar, of course, was a very valuable commodity, kept under lock and key. It was not that highly refined, loosely granulated sugar we have today, but rather came in a cube or a cone and you just scraped off whatever was needed for a recipe. The brass-banded oval box is an English cellaret. It originally would have been lead or zinc lined so that ice could have been kept in it and wines kept cool. The porcelain on the table comes to us from the Ravenel family of St. John's Parish, Berkeley, here in South Carolina. It's a Chinese export pattern by the name of pseudo tobacco leaf. A great deal more of it in the cabinet here, including a beautiful tureen and some sauce beds. Usually when you think about 18th century Chinese export, you're thinking blue and white or cream and brown. So this almost hot pink and lime green is a little bit different for the period. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them for you.
Yeah.
Isn't that great? The cheese has
So
unusual.
what's the thing on the top of the sugar?
That is a fly catcher.
Oh,
It would have, it's hollow under here, and you would have put a sugar water into this little ridge around the bottom. The flies would have then come up and attracted to it and come up this way and gotten in and not been able to get back out.
Gotcha.
We should have more of those.
Yes.
today.
I know. Wouldn't mind having one of those around.
Don't need the swatter then.
Mhm.
They always elude that.
No chemicals involved, really.
Right.
Much better. We're going to step out to the base of the staircase by the cabinet out there. This was originally the gun cabinet for the house. You have to remember this house was built just a couple of years before the Revolution. Good idea to have your ammunition and weapons right by. Still a few Indian uprisings going on. But today we use it as a display case for archaeological finds. Everything seen here, plus hundreds more pieces that are at the Charleston Museum, was found on this property, either in the cellar or in the back garden before it was re-landscaped. The items at the very top come from the time of the Milners, the gunsmiths who were the first occupants of the lot. And then the items on the next three shelves come from the time of the Heywards. Some beautiful porcelains, wine glasses, wine bottles. The coins are English coins, English halfpennies that date from 1770. Then the items on the very bottom are what we call post-Heyward, mid to late 19th century, including some children's toys and marbles and even some toothbrush handles that would originally have had boar's bristles in them. As you may have heard in your time here in Charleston, we had a rather significant earthquake in 1886. If the Richter scale had existed, it would have been about a 7.3. And this house, like many, many others, took a great deal of damage. Most of ours was on this axis, with the back of the house settling a little bit. Once everything got straightened out, the floor was straightened out, the staircase reinforced and everything, we ended up with one very shallow first step. So I do caution you about that as you go up the steps. We will be going up to the first room on your right, the green bedroom. It's generally felt that this is the room Washington would have used when staying here. It is the largest of the bed chambers and has the best ventilation with 4 windows. He was here in early May. It's hot here in May, as you can tell. You want the president to be as comfortable as possible. The bed is the one piece we can say came from the Heyward family. It was not used in this house, but rather on one of the plantations south of here in Beaufort County. And it's referred to as a feather bed, not for the mattress, but for the feather carvings here on the footposts. Most Charleston-made beds of this period had either rice or tobacco leaf carvings on them. So we're not quite sure what the significance of the feather carving on this one is. Of course, it is dressed for winter. If it were dressed for summer, it would have light hangings on it. The headboard might be removed and the bed even moved to the center of the room, because we'll do whatever it takes to catch breeze. Whatever it takes. The linen or clothes press between the windows is another great example of late 18th century Charleston cabinetry. We have beautiful mahogany with wonderful